Good morning, everybody. Did you have a good night last night? Well, just one housekeeping point. We heard that lots of you got together and did some really good stuff about how we move all of this forward. So what we're going to do after the first break is have like a 20-minute open microphone session where you can stand up and explain to us what you did and your thoughts and views on moving forward. But we're going to actually talk to you a little bit more about it at the end of the day in terms of our view on how we do it formally, but we'd love to have your thoughts and input to that just after the break at 11. Now, what we're going to kick off today with is we have over 100 different countries represented in the room. And what we'd like you to do now is to stand up and introduce yourself to your neighbor and say good morning in your language and give them the greeting of your country. So up you get.
Ooh. Ooh.
So hug, kiss, whatever.
Hello, master. Anytime.
Great, thank you. Okay.
The kids. Yay, Anna.
I'll do the agenda. You want to do something next, and I'll do the agenda after that.
Okay. So what am I doing
That's
now?
a very long way of saying good morning. So, that's a nice, warm way to start the morning off. If we can pull up the agenda, and we'll talk to you a little bit about the running order for today. So, Kate, do you want to talk about the first?
Okay, so the opening plenary today is going to be the changing power of the media. And I think this is part of the big story about One Young World, because it's really the story about a world that you're living in, which, as David was saying the other night, is a very different one, certainly from the one he grew up in, but much more so from the one I grew up in. So that's the first one. So are we going through the agenda of the whole day, David?
Yeah, we'll just give you a quick outline of what we're going through.
Okay, so after the fourth plenary, can we go back to that first? Thank you so much, sorry about that. We will be having Dawn Butler, who's the UK Minister for Youth, to address you very briefly. And that will be followed by a session hosted by Martin Davidson, who's one of your counsellors, who's the Chief Executive of the British Council, which works in over 100 countries worldwide. And I know that some of you know them. Martin is chairing that session on behalf of the Parents Circle and Families Forum. And that's a session for our delegates from Israel and Palestine. I think very meaningful in this context. Then to the break, and then onwards to the next. The session that David suggests is talking about what you did last night.
Not everything you did last night, just the bit that's related to today.
What you did about One Young World stuff last night.
I've seen on Facebook what some of you did last night.
Okay, and then John Replogle, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Burt's Bees and a big supporter of One Young World, is going to talk about a company of good governance and sustainability. And then the fifth plenary is on global health. Now, global health has 3 counsellors on it. Global health was a difficult one for us because if you go back to the original global consultation process, global health was not in there. But the 15,000 respondents worldwide, about 20% of them consistently raised global health, so we added it later. There's that plenary, and then we go to lunch. And then Don Tapscott, who is the author of Macroeconomics, which is his newest book, is going to talk about youth in the 21st century. And I'm sure you can talk to him about youth in the 21st century. Then we go to the 6th plenary on politics for a positive future. Then we go to the break. And then at the end of the day.
Next slide on session 4.
Hi.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, this is very important here. You know from early days on the site that BBC Global News and BBC Worldwide have been partnering with us throughout this process. And BBC Global News' World Have Your Say is their showcase program. Again, that goes to 130 countries, I think, worldwide. Goes out in 32 languages. And World Have Your Say is an hour-long session that they do once a week. It's their showcase program, and it averages 60 million listeners worldwide. And for that session, they're not going to be talking to me and David. They are going to be talking to you guys. You are going out this afternoon to 60 million people worldwide.
So those question marks aren't actually that we didn't know what to put in the slide. It's because it's
you.
We don't know yet who is going to speak, but it's you guys speaking and going out live to 60 million people around the world.
And then
no pressure.
When we go to the closing ceremony, there will be quite a lot of what we call in old language housekeeping, because obviously there are a lot of steps to be set up for taking you forward and further establishing One Young World. And then we go to the closing ceremony.
Indeed. So we'll get into the first plenary, which is all about the power and role of media. And we've got a fantastic set of counsellors to introduce to you. And the first one I'm going to introduce is one of my own personal heroes who I met about 18 months ago, and it's Oscar Morales. And I'll say a little bit about Oscar before he comes on. He's actually been spending most of the session with you. In fact, we lost him this morning. And I said, he's been sitting through every single session in the audience. He must be somewhere. And he was out here. But Oscar is probably the best example we could ever find of somebody using the power of social media to affect positive change. He was sick of the FARC, the terrorist organization in Colombia. He set up a Facebook movement called A Million Voices, and basically it ended up with over 15 million people marching in 40 cities around the world against the FARC through one Facebook page. He's an amazing guy, boundless energy, and probably the living embodiment of what we want One Young World to be all about. So to give a big One Young World welcome to Oscar Morales.
And the next counsellor up is one of the
Kay
ones...
gets a hug.
One of the ones you met yesterday was Elio Leoni-Sceti. I want just to tell you a little bit about Elio, because he was one of the first global business leaders who took up One Young World and really took the whole concept to his heart. But he was very funny because he agreed to do it very quickly, and he just said, I think this is a brilliant idea. I want to help. I want to be there. But then he said to me that he went home to his teenage children, and he said, I was talking about One Young World, and he said, you know, when I told my children I was going to be the global CEO of EMI and I was going to be friends with Coldplay and all of these people, my children thought that was okay, but that was just okay. When I told them I was doing One Young World, they thought I was really cool. So he has to be here because all his street cred rests on it. He's Elio Leoni-Sceti, the global CEO of EMI. And he is now officially cool.
Good morning.
Another kiss.
The next counsellor has been a fantastic partner for us. And one of the interesting things about this whole idea is when we started talking to people, there were a number of people who thought we were completely insane, and a number of people said, this is such a great idea, how can I help? And Carol was one of those. She's the managing director of YouGov Stone. Now, all of the polling we've done, the 15,000 people around the world who filled in the surveys, Carol has led that entire process for us and been an amazing partner. She's also probably the most networked woman in the UK and introduced us to a lot of very amazing people who've also been able to help us, and was the person who actually introduced us to Bob Geldof. So please give a big welcome to Carol Stone. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey, girl. Now, our next counsellor you've not met yet, and he is Richard Sambrook, who is the CEO of BBC Global News and the director of the BBC. And I know that many of you know the BBC. You know the BBC in your country. And if you have spent any of your time in a country where maybe the media is not free or a bit controlled, you would know how important the BBC is. Certainly, I know that from South Africa. I showed you on the opening night the footage of Desmond Tutu, which I would never have seen were it not for the phenomenal reporting of the BBC. Richard is a supporter of One Young World, and BBC Global News, BBC World Services have been supporting us right throughout this process. I think talking to all of you, Richard laid on the broadcast for this afternoon, and he has worked all over the world and reported. He was the reporter for the BBC at the fall of the Berlin Wall. So will you welcome Richard Sambrook?
Our next counsellor is Jennifer Correiro. Now, she was named as one of the 100 most influential women in Canada. She's a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. She runs an organization called Taking It Global, which is all about how youth can be engaged across borders, across cultures, to actually impact positive change. Her nickname, as Harkon the other night told me, I didn't realize this, but it's so obvious when he said it. Her nickname within the Young Global Leaders is Jenergy. And just a quick anecdote about it. We had this private session with Bill Clinton at Davos, and people were kind of a bit, the atmosphere was a bit cold in the room, and people were a bit nervous and the whole thing. And she got up and stood in front of everybody and sang this song and got us all joining in that she did when she was 16 at school, which was one of the most deeply embarrassing moments that I've ever witnessed, but was unbelievable in her ability to just motivate 100 people to stand up and break down all the barriers. So here she is. Yeah, you can do it here, yeah. No, you're not. You're not allowed to do it.
When we were selecting the counsellors for you guys, quite a few entrepreneurs and business leaders said to me, you're looking for the real rock star business leaders. And this guy's name was mentioned so many times. But because he's actually a client of ours, I was a little bit hesitant because we were being very careful not to link business interests or to confuse ourselves. But there was such a rising demand for this guy. And then we heard the end of last week there was a chance that he may not come because he's been doing a very, very, very big deal. And we learned to our absolute delight this morning that he's here. He's the founder and the chief executive officer, and I know a lot of you know him, of Air Asia, Tony Fernandes.
Welcome. So.
Okay, to the global consultation process, the 10-point results. Are we up with that? Okay, so at the top there, and this obviously is politically sensitive, so let's deal with it. Complete freedom of speech is essential to a successful society, and up at 80% strongly agree or agreeing with that statement. So an important thing.
Interestingly, if you look at the bottom bar, only around 60% believe that the press in my country is free to communicate as it wishes. So an interesting gap.
Very important, but title of the session, that the media is changing its identity and power. And I guess that's what this is all about. David?
Yes, so if we get into the resolution, the draft resolution. I think just to reiterate the point that we made yesterday, an enormous and important part of these resolutions is the message that we are sending and you are sending from here to the outside world. So it may be, particularly talking about things like climate yesterday or businesses being responsible. It's like, yeah, we all think it's obvious. You do. But there's a whole bunch of people who are not in this room who actually don't think that's obvious and would disagree with you. So we're sending a very important message about what you, the young people of the world, think about these issues. And this resolution is in the belief that freedom of speech promotes a successful society. We call upon the media to use its influence and power to help protect truth and personal freedom.
Now, with Nick Haysom from United Nations, we tried to draft related goals here because it doesn't relate to a specific Millennium Development Goal. So we drafted that delegates would harness the power of the media available to them, and you guys are fantastic at that, using your resources to ensure that the truth is always made known. In areas where personal freedoms are compromised, delegates would work to eradicate the obstacles that prevent freedom of information and freedom of speech.
So that's the resolution and the development goal, and we're now going to, I think you know the format, we hand you over to the wonderful counsellors to introduce.